Okay, yeah, so welcome everyone to this talk by Simone Puel, which will be his PhD talk. So in the email, there is a PhD response form. So please, if you could fill that out after the talk, that would be good. So Simone can have some feedback and be considered for the best talk prize that exists. So yeah, so Simone is a PhD candidate here working with Thorsten Becker on forward modeling of the earthquake and inverse modeling of the earthquake cycle. Before coming to UT, Simone did a undergraduate and master's degree at University of Milano Bicocca, yeah, and then a master's at Michigan Tech. And then, yeah, so today, Simone is going to present on his PhD work. So please take it away.
Thank you, Ed, for the kind introduction. So welcome to everyone. And so today I'm going to talk about mostly on my research that we conducted here at UT for the last almost 5 years. And so the title of my dissertation and the work is going to be a mixed forward inverse modeling framework for earthquake deformation problems. And it's a work that is not only me, but also with a lot of collaborators from Thorsten, my advisor, also from Omar, and people at UTIG, also at the institute. And so I want to start with a very, very general introduction and why I care about earthquakes. And so here you can see a plot of the location of the earthquakes that is represented with these dots, colored by the earthquake depth, and also the location of the volcanoes in the world. And so you can see that most of these, both like volcanoes, but also earthquakes in particular, are located to the plate boundaries. And where actually strain and stress accumulating, and they generate these big earthquakes that are very powerful, and they cause a lot of damage and also a lot of fatalities. And so here you can see like the global death from the different disaster, from natural disaster. And you can see here then, for example, from 1900 to 2021, and you can see that, for example, for different type of natural disaster, there is a decrease in the decrease of the size of the bubble that represents the number of people that died during these years. And you can see that with the improvement or the breathing codes, for example, for floods or for the availability of food, these natural disasters, for example, for droughts and flood, they decrease over time. Instead, for earthquakes and also for extreme weather like storms and extreme temperature, the size of the bubble remains more or less constant over time. So that means that we didn't understand exactly how to mitigate these hazards, and so they cause not only like a lot of like fatalities, but also they let me see if I can. Also a lot of damage. And so it's not only interesting for as a scientist to mitigate these hazards, also interesting for government to actually decrease the risk related to this natural disaster. And for example, here you can see where I color all the different disasters, the US billions of dollars of damage of these events from 1970s to 2022. And you can see the earthquakes, they occupy a big portion of the amount of damage that the government had to pay and the insurance had to pay. And so if we want to mitigate this hazard, we need to understand better the earthquake process, and we understand the physics, how the seismic cycle of these events, they occur over time, and actually the seismic cycle occurs. And so this is kind of like a small sketch, a very idealized sketch of actually how we think about the seismic cycle. So here on the x-axis we have time, and on the y-axis we have stress. Also like strain is kind of like similar. And so you can see that over time we have an increase in stress at the plate boundaries until we reach some threshold. And then we have an earthquake, and then we are releasing stress, and then we have kind of the aposeismic phase. Then we have more aposeismic phase where actually the stress are kind of like relaxing over time, and then kind of increase in the loading on the interseismic cycle. And so you can see actually that this cycles per person, and the occurrence time is on the order of like hundreds of years or more. And so you can see that it's a very simple sketch, but advances in space geology and also new seismic observation, they show that actually this seismic cycle, this idealized fixed leap cycle that we have in mind, is slightly more complex. Okay. And so, for example, here are some observations, some new data that from the mostly to occur earthquake in Japan, and because this earthquake was very well monitored by the Japanese colleagues. And so you can see, for example, a Wang et al. In 2019, they observed as a drop in seismic velocities at the coastal depth. So you can see here, here's the earthquake that occurred in March 2011. So you can see that there is a drop in seismic velocity when there was the earthquake. And so you can see for different different frequencies of the waves, where the short period waves are more related to the ground shaking, okay? But then we have also some variation in seismic velocity, also like a deeper depth, okay? So that means that there is some earthquake processes involved, and we don't understand exactly why, okay? Other studies suggest, for example, from Becker 2018, that there is a variation in horizontal normal stress, like before the Oki earthquake. And you can see that Oki earthquake occurs like at 0. And so you can see there is more variation from a compressional regime for more attentional regimes 3 years, starting 3 years before the earthquake. Okay. And also some other people suggest that in the location the Oki earthquake is presenting with this kind of like a white star, there was also variational drop also in the B values. The B values is the relationship that relates the number of earthquakes here on the y-axis and the magnitude of the earthquakes. So then that, for example, in 2004, 2003, you can see that the B values was around 0.7, and then there is a drop in 0.5, close to the prior to the earthquakes. So that means that we have an increase in large magnitude events close to the main shocks rather than before, okay? So we don't understand exactly how this process occurs and what is the physical meaning of this process, but we need actually to build a mechanical model to actually understand better these observations, okay? And so in the last 2 decades or more, we have an advance of observation, not advance of like a seismic and also geodetic network that actually can lead us to new observations. And so we understood a lot about the subductions and structure, but also like the earthquake cycle. And you can see that we understood the presence of, for example, after big earthquakes, or the presence of slow slip events in the interface, at the interface. Or we understood also the connection between, like, the fluid migration from the interface to actually lead to the mechanical, okay? And so you can study from a physical point of view these processes, not only from a forward modeling in the sense that you can tune your parameters and try to match the observation data, but you can also start from the observation, and through our inverse modeling, you can actually try to quantify what are your parameters of interest. And then you can also quantify also what are the uncertainties related to these parameters. And so the idea of my PhD is started to build this mechanical model that has to be including both the forward and inverse modeling within the same framework, that has to be flexible, that has to be transparent, that means that it's reproducible, also that can be easily extensible. And so this aligns completely with the anti-mode project, is led by here at UT, but also there are also a lot of colleagues from Japan and also New Zealand. And so the basic idea of our effort is a joint effort that we are trying to advance our understanding of earthquake processes. And so we are trying to combine different types of data sets in kind of a more mechanical model that can do forward and inverse modeling using adjoints and try to better understand the physics of these earthquakes, okay? And so my dissertation is kind of built in 5 chapters. When there is a main introduction, then there is a second chapter I'm gonna focus today, but I'm gonna mostly focus on the 3rd chapters. And I'm gonna touch base at the end to the last chapter of my dissertation, and then also final remarks and future work, what is actually potential. So I want to start with the 2nd chapter, and I want to start with kind of like the framework that we are building, and we are basically building our framework based on 2 open source libraries. One is Phoenix and one is UTIG. So Phoenix is an open source library that is based on finite elements and provides all the tools for the finite element discretization. It's built on PETS, so provides all the linear algebra and all the solver issue. And also it's very interesting because Phoenix, you can input your own equation in like a sort of piece of paper. So the way that you implement your physics is very transparent, is very easily readable. I'm going to show you some examples, okay? And it's for the reason that it is very being used for like learning and also teaching. And the first attempt and use was from John Wilson and Mark Spiegel in 2014, when they built this TerraPerma code that they show a lot of examples of transparency, flexibility, and coupling different kind of multi-physics problems, okay? And for the inverse method, in the inverse problem, we are using UTIG that was developed here at the team, at the Odin Institute, actually, this library, and implements all the state-of-the-art adjoint based algorithms to solve deterministic operation inverse problems. So not only studying for the best optimal parameter, but also like giving some distributional uncertainties also. It's built on Phoenix, so it's in the same computation architecture, and also it's very used for learning and teaching because it's very kind of like easy to use, and I'm going to show you some example here. And so for the rest of the talk, I'm going to talk about mostly for the elasticity equation, but then we are going to talk about also mostly, or we use it also for studying more complex problems in viscoelasticity and also in seismic anisotropy. And so, for example, for people that are not familiar with finite elements, the finite elements method is a numerical method that approximates the solution of different kind of problems, like, for example, based on PDEs mostly. Okay, so we have some, for example, a sample elasticity equation that we can write in a strong form, okay, where there is a relationship between the stress tensor and the strain tensor through this fourth order material property elastic tensor. And then we have constituted the conservation linear momentum here. And so the basic idea of the finite elements, you need to derive from the strong form what we call the weak form. And so we cannot do a more integral level, a more mathematical idea. And then the idea is that you need to discretize your domain, and then your solution is going to be, you discretize the domain in different kind of triangles, and then your solution is going to be at the vertices of each triangle. So that's what you need some interpolation function that's going to give you information and solution between U1 and U3, for example. And so what you do, you introduce this kind of shape function, and so the solution of your entire domain is going to be a combination of polynomials, okay? And so what you do then, you calculate the solution at the element level, and then you do in the entire domain, and you do a global level, and then you call your solution, okay? And so the beauty of Phoenix is actually what it needs that you derive and you write your equations this kind of weak form, okay? And so we use it not only for elasticity, I use it for like viscoelasticity, for example, here, and this is like a benchmark that I did a few years ago, where we studied the kind of a new formulation of viscoelasticity, okay? And so here is kind of a crane test where we have a cube, and you want to press the cube and see how actually the deformation and the stress, the tangential stress increase over time. And we benchmark with analytic solutions. Or you can do more complex problem solving, for example, for viscous anisotropy. And this is the work led by Liu here, and here in a classical example when we plotted a second environmental studies to the strain rate tensor. And so for my talk, I'm going to focus mostly on the elasticity. So it seems a very easy equations, but we can write in a different way. So instead of solving for just displacement, we solve for stress, displacement, and rotation at the same time. And the reason why we are doing so is because we want this formulation allows you a clean way to describe a slip along the fault. Okay, so if you have a discontinuity here, you want to describe what is the slip, the variation displacement between one side of the fault and the other side of the fault. And this formulation allows you to have the slip in the right-hand side of the equations. And so you can see that in Phoenix, you can actually like write your equation very clean and simple way, very transparent way. Okay, and so you go line by line, you can actually easily kind of read also how you can implement it in Phoenix. Okay. And so this is kind of like a benchmark that we did in this with this formulation, where we take a consideration of the crack mod 2, and there are analytical solutions for these examples. And to show the basic idea, you have a domain, you have a crack in the middle, and then you need to apply some displacement from one side to the other side of the fault. So use kind of like a stress fault, a left lateral stress fault. And so here you can, in the first column, you can see the analytic solution. For example, here we are plotting the magnitude of the displacement, and here we are plotting the normal stress. In the second and third panel, you can see the difference between the numerical solution and analytic solution for the classical standard displacement formulation. So actually, how people implement the displacement, the elasticity equations. And here you can see our idea in our framework using kind of the mixed pipeline formulation. So you can see if the color is white, that means the solution is great, then match the analytic solution. If the color is blue, that means that the solution is better. So you can see that our formulation is better with stress singularity at the crack tips because we approximate the displacement at the center of the cells. Okay. For the inverse problem is that we are using adjoint-based optimization methods. And so the basic idea of inverse problem, instead of starting, for example, from tuning some parameters and try to match data, we are trying to start from the data itself and try to infer what are actually the model parameters that we are interested in. For example, here we're going to be interested in this fault slip, okay, and the material properties. And so you can, if you want to solve this problem, you need to minimize a function that we call objective function that is composed by the misfit between your predicted data here and the observed data here. So let's say that you want to predict the surface displacement during an earthquake, and you have GPS data here, so you want to try to minimize the misfit between your what you model and what you have. Okay, and so you need to. There is also a regularization term here to regularize the system. So the basic idea, if you have a function, you want to minimize the function, you need two ingredients. You need the gradient, okay, that the gradient has to be 0, and then you need the second derivative has to be positive. Okay. And so the way actually this adjoint based optimization method works, you need to build like a Lagrangian formalism, and then you start to take derivatives. Okay. So at each iteration, you solve the forward problem, so you get stress displacement and rotation. Then you solve the adjoint equation as well, and then you get the gradient. Okay. And so then you find some algorithm to minimize the gradient, keeping the second derivative positive. Okay.
Simone, the Lagrangian is giving you also smoothing of the model?
No, so the Lagrangian is including here in the objective function. So there is also some smoothing regularization terms between also the Lagrangian. And so this is kind of like how we had, for example, the adjoint equations. And I don't want to go in details, but you can see here how you can implement easily in Phoenix. Otherwise, you can use clip and does automatic differentiation, so it calculates derivatives. Okay, so you can see that you can just solve forward problem or solve adjoint problem or evaluate gradient, and so it's going to calculate automatically adjoint and also the gradient information. So at each modeling, at each point in your domain. Okay, and so for the first chapter of my dissertation, I'm mostly interested in the fault slip. Okay, so the basic idea. The basic idea is like you have an earthquake, and so you have some observation at the top, observation on the surface, and like for example GPS or the SAR, and you have some deformation in displacement informations. So what you're doing, you're trying to invert this displacement to recover what was the slip at the fault interface. Okay, and so why do we care about the fault slip? Is very important because we can analyze the seismic source. Okay, we calculate the slip distribution during an earthquake. Or we can calculate, for example, so the fault locking, how the slip interface is locked, so how the two plates are locked between each other, for example. And then we can use also to mitigate seismic tsunamis and hazard, because if you compute the slip distribution in real time, you can also estimate what is the amount of vertical displacement, so therefore also what is the amount of like tsunami weight, tsunami height. Or you can use also for post-input for seismic and tsunami models. So the way that usually is done, you have a fault here. For example, here you have Japan. Here you have the on the right you can see the Japan trench. And so you need to discretize the fault in different fault patches, and then you solve the Okada solution, Okada dislocation model. Okay. So you need to build a matrix of this function. Okay, where you call G, for example, and then you are interested in the slip. And then you have some observation on the surface, for example, from the GPS. And then what you do this square and you get this slip. Okay. The problem with this one is that using this semi-analytical approach, the main assumption is that they assume that the Earth structure is homogeneous. Okay. We know that the Earth is not homogeneous. Also, they use, for example, a vertically layered medium. Okay. But some people they suggest in 2015, 2016, that actually the material heterogeneity is very important. Okay. And actually, the accounting of material heterogeneity in the fault slip distribution is very kind of important and kind of mitigate also how much slip you can actually infer. Okay, so the advantage of the standard method is that the metrics can be pre-compute. Okay, the G metrics. The also disadvantage is that it's expensive to compute these metrics, especially for lateral heterogeneity material properties. And so the way that we're doing it kind of a slightly different way. Okay. And then one way that I want to explain, I'm going to explain also some results, okay? And so this is our toy problem here. So we have a curved fault, we have 20 observations at the top, okay? And so we have an earthquake, we nucleate an earthquake around 25 kilometers depth. We create the synthetic data at the top, at 20 observation, like say 20 GPS station, and then we inverted this data from the GPS station to recover the slip, okay? And so here with the black solid line, it represented the true slip, so the slip that we use to input to calculate the synthetic data. And then the color segment are representing the inferred slip from the inversion. Okay. So, and the color is based on the absolute error with respect to the two solutions. That means that if the color of the segment is blue, that means the solution is great. Okay, we exactly match the true slip, what we expect. If the solution is red, then the solution is bad. And so here we compare our approach, the adjoint phase optimization methods, with actually the standard approach with Green's function. And the way that we didn't just compare the result, but we compare actually the structure of the problems. So here what we compare also the eigenvalues, eigenvector of the matrix G of Green's function, usually the standard approach, and then we compare with the eigenvectors, eigenvalues with the Hessian misfit, which is the secondary derivative of the objective function that I showed you before. So you can see here that actually we match completely the eigenvalues here, and we are the eigenvalues especially above this threshold. Where the eigenvalues above threshold, that means that these eigenvalues are very informative about the data. Okay, and here you can see that actually that we compare the eigenvectors of the using the method of Green's function or our approach, they are exactly the same. So we say that actually the final remarks of this project is actually that even though we are solving the problem in a completely different way, just optimization problems and not using matrix of Green's function, the solutions are basically very, very similar, not the same. And so that's leading me to go to the second chapter. And the second chapter, the main idea is like to revisit the slip distribution problem. We're going to also try to understand how much material heterogeneity affects our solutions. Okay, and so how people usually infer like the Earth structure, elastic Earth structure. Usually they use satellite tomographies. And so here is an example of footweb FWI results from Southeast Asia, from Tao et al. And also Steve Kran. And so you can see here the presence of the slab of the Japan Trench that goes beneath the Eurasian plate. And so you can see the variation in T-wave velocities, and you can understand like the presence of a stronger slab, so where actually the VT is higher with respect to like a weaker overriding plate. Okay, so when you have these maps and you have not only VT but also VS, you actually try to come up and infer what are the elastic properties. Okay, so you can understand what is the shear modulus or the limit parameter for elastic properties. Okay, the way that we are solving this problem is slightly different. So we are not using seismic data, we are just using displacement data, just GPS data, and we cannot try to infer the same structure. Okay. And so here is just an example how actually people they understood how actually material heterogeneity affects the slip distribution. And this is a work done by Ashima et al. In 2016, where they revisit the coseismic slip distribution of the Tohoku earthquake in Japan. So you can see here the Tohoku earthquake here is represented, the epicenter is represented with this yellow star. And then you can see that we have a lot of GPS stations, like almost 1,300 GPS stations recording this event. And then they were interested in finding the slip distribution of this earthquake. And so in the first panel here, in the first column, you can see the slip distribution assume homogeneous medium. So we assume homogeneous medium that the Earth is homogeneous, and we try to invert the surface displacement for the slip distribution. And you can see here they found that there was more than 40 meters of slip close to the trench. Okay, and here in the bottom is basically the misfit. Okay, so that means that is observed data minus the predicted data given this inferred slip. Okay, so you can see if the color is white, that means that we exactly match the observation. If the color are blue or red, that means that we either predict or over predict respectively the results. And so you can see that if we assume homogeneous medium, we have very systematic error where we under predict the western part of Honshu, and we under predict the eastern part, over predict the eastern part of Honshu, also the offshore GPS. Okay. Then what they did, we actually get the structure that is more complicated. So then they say, okay, let's put the cross that is kind of like a bit weaker than the mantle, and then repeat the same exercise. Okay. And so here you can see the difference of the slip distribution with respect to the homogeneous medium. But you can see here the misfit. Okay, so the misfit, assuming just there is a cross that is weaker than the mantle below, you can see that actually the misfit decreases. Okay, we see more whitish color, but you can see there is still systematic error. Okay, then they say, okay, let's do something more complicated. Let's say that we have strong as slab. Okay, so where we have the Japan trends that goes beneath the Eurasian plate that is kind of stronger. It's almost 85 gigapascal. And they repeat the same exercise. Okay, so this is kind of the difference with respect to the homogeneous media, this distribution. And here is kind of like the match with the data. So you see that actually assuming that there is variation in material property in the Earth structure, increase and decrease the misspeak between the observed data and the predicted data. Okay. And so one way that we were interested first to we want to tackle the same problem, but we're interested first of how actually the material heterogeneity affects the surface displacement. Okay, so how much information in the surface displacement are recorded by, for example, lateral variation material properties. And this is kind of a 2D synthetic test that I performed, where you can see like our toy problem. So we have a fold that is a straight fold where we vary the fold deep between 30 and 60 degrees, and we have a triangular anomaly, or for example, Poisson ratio or shear modulus. Okay, so then what we did, we cannot change the shear modulus or the Poisson ratio of the structure, and we look at how actually the surface displacement looks like. And so in the first two panels, in the first row, you can see the variation in the gray color. You can see the variation of the surface displacement that recorded by GPS by just changing the fold deep between 30 and 60, so 30 and 60 degrees. Okay. With the other colors, with the blue and orange color, are representing the same surface displacement, assuming just a fold deep in 45 degrees, but changing the shear modulus and the Poisson ratio in the triangular anomaly with respect to our background. So you can see that actually the material properties variation in the triangular anomaly affects a lot, affects not that much this surface displacement. So that means that when we try to invert this surface displacement, the amount of information given by the material properties is much lower than just the fold steep. Okay. And so you can see here the effect of material heterogeneity, just the difference between the changing the Poisson ratio, shear modulus, and also the homogeneous medium. Okay, so you can see that the pattern is different. Okay, and so this is kind of like an example of the inversion that we try instead to take all these observations at the top, like surface deformation from GPS station, and we try to invert this observation to recover the material properties. So this is our toy problem. We have a first fold, we have an earthquake nucleate at 25 kilometers depth. And then we have a triangular anomaly of Poisson ratio. So with this triangular anomaly, is a more incompressible material with respect to the background. So we compute the synthetic data, and then we invert this synthetic data to recover the presence of the anomaly. And you can see here the two results, just changing the regularization. So you can see that if like inverting for noisy observation, you can see that the presence of material anomaly here, but we use information of the edges, okay, or the sharp edges of the triangular anomaly. And this is because we use kind of more Laplacian type regularizations, okay. If we use more total variation regularization, you can see actually that the solution greatly improved, okay. So we infer the presence of the anomaly, but also we infer also the kind of like a geometry of the anomaly, okay. And so this is an example that we know, let's assume that we know the sleep distribution and we just invert it for material properties, okay? But indeed, there is some trade-off between sleep and also the material properties in the surface displacement, I saw in the previous slide. So this test instead is like doing kind of joint inversion where we take the observation at top and we invert both for the material structure, also for the fold sleep, okay? And so here is kind of the same problem as before, where we change here the shear modulus instead of the Poisson ratio, okay? And so you can see that if we try to invert the 20 observation at the top, we kind of greatly infer also the presence of the anomaly here. Also, we infer also the presence of the sleep distribution, okay, in a very nice way, okay? But one can ask right now, okay, you just told us that there is a trade-off between sleep and also material structure. How actually, what is the contribution of one parameter with all the other parameters in the inversions? And so this plot is actually what I'm going to explain you right now, and what is actually the result of our what is the trade-off between fold sleep and shear modulus. So here I'm going to explain you very briefly this test. So this is just forward modeling. So we have the same kind of toy problem as before. So we have a triangular anomaly here, okay, and then we have an earthquake nucleated 25 kilometers depth. And here we just keep fix the slip and we keep fix the shear modulus in the triangular anomaly, and we just compute surface displacement, okay. And this is kind of our reference model that assuming kind of like a sort of slip and a sort of subductions and structure, okay? So the way we did, we ran 2,500 models, just perturbing a bit the slip or perturbing a bit the shear modulus structure in the triangular anomaly, okay? And so here what is plotted is basically plotting the absolute error or the non-error of the surface displacement of all the 2,500 models with respect to the reference models. And so you can see that what does it mean that if for these contours represent the area where there is a lot of combination of different type of models, just changing a bit the slip or the material properties, and they give you the same amount of surface displacement, okay? So just changing a bit the slip or the shear modulus, you can see that actually we can produce the same results, the same surface displacement. So you can see that this contour has stretched in the shear modulus direction. That means that it's kind of easier to get very good reliable result on the slip, but for the shear modulus structure, you have some trade-off, okay? So there is a bigger area, there is a spread of many models, they can actually produce the same surface displacement. So that means that our problem is not exactly unique, okay? And so then I wanna do a step forward, okay? I show you just two synthetic tests. Now I'm gonna show you like a more practical test. And so this is, I took the same test of Ashim et al, where we are interested in the 1240 earthquake, okay? And so here I presented the surface displacement recorded by more than 1,300 GPS stations in the Japan regions, where you see here on the left, you can see the horizontal displacement recorded during the earthquake, where the earthquake is represented, the epicenter is represented with this green star. And you can see the north and east component of displacement here, and then the vertical component here. So the basic idea right now, we have not only GPS, but we also acoustic GPS and some offshore acoustic pressure gauges. And so the basic idea, we are trying to take all this information that we're recording the earthquake, and we are trying to convert this observation to recover both the eco-seismic slip distribution and also the seismic, the shear modulus structure, for example. And so I don't want to go into many details, but there are extensive literature talking about what was the slip distribution during the Tohoku earthquake. And this is one of the best places because the Japanese colleagues put a lot of effort, a lot of money to deploy all these instruments. And so there is very well recorded, okay? And so what people they found using not only geodetic data, but also seismic or tsunami data, or joint using different type of data, they found that the main, the maximum slip occurs close to the trench, okay? And some people they infer more than 80 meters of slip, some people around 40, some people around 60. So there is a lot of like difference between how much slip actually produced this earthquake, okay? And so I want to go into the results. So this is kind of we tackle this problem in 3D. So we use Phoenix and Italy to solve these problems. And so this is kind of the finite element mesh that I used. And here is representing Japan Peninsula, and the orange triangle represents all the GPS stations that we use in the versions. We use all the available data, so including not only almost 1,300 GPS on land, we use also 8 acoustic GPS offshore and also 6 pressure gauges, acoustic pressure gauges that they were measuring vertical displacement offshore in the seafloor. Okay, and so here we find the mesh. The mesh is more or less 27,000 vertices, 140,000 cells. Is more than 11 degrees of freedom. The resolution is the smallest area is 10 kilometers. And so the next step, we're gonna try to invert all this observation just for the slip distribution assuming homogeneous medium. Okay, so this is how it looks the results. So here on the right, you can see the slip distribution that we infer, just assuming that the Earth is homogeneous. So we know that is a very strong assumption, but we wanted to have a base to compare when we run the joint inversions. Okay, So you can see that we inferred more than 40 meters deep. Many people have inferred. And it's slightly different than the Ashima solution here, where we found the maximum sleep at the trench. Here we found the maximum sleep that is not exactly at the trench, but there is also a sleep also that reaches the trench. And here on the right, you can see the misfit. So that means observed data minus the predicted data. So you can see that there is still systematic error, and the solution is very similar to the Ashima method that I showed you before. Okay, so a stream homogeneous mean there is always a trade-off, a systematic error where you underpredict, for example, the western part of one shore, and you overpredict the offshore and also the eastern part of one shore. Okay. So then we run the same problem, but actually now we are running the joint inversion. So we actually allow the presence of material heterogeneity, or we for both the sleep distribution, but also for the shear module structure in Japan. And so here you can see the results, and you can see that the sleep doesn't change so much. You can go back and forth to see the difference. So the sleep distribution doesn't change so much, but you can see that the misfit completely reduced. Okay, so there is a lot of improvement, allowing for lateral heterogeneity to actually better match the data. Okay, and so in the next slide, I'm going to show you actually our inference of the subductions and structure in Japan. So here with the blue color means that the material is stronger. Okay, with the red color means that the material is weaker. Okay, so with the rock are weaker with respect to, for example, the slab. Okay, so here is just a map view where we found that we have a presence of the strongest slab in the Pacific plate. Well, actually we expect, because the strongest to be stronger to actually subduct under the Eurasian plate. And also we see like a very weaker material in the overlapping plate. And if you zoom if you look closely where I plot the volcanic arc here, you can see actually that we infer also weaker material under volcanic arc. Something that we expect intuitively, but nobody has ever first imaged the weaker material under volcanic arc before. Okay. And so then you can see here stronger material on the eastern part of the top quark here, the epicenter, and then very weaker material here. But here the result here a bit slightly weird, in the sense that there is always a trade-off between the sleep and also the shear modulus in that particular area. So that I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you 3 cross-section of the subductions of structure, where from A to A prime, where you can see actually the presence of the slab. So we image completely the subductions on slab, the Pacific plate, beneath the subduct beneath the Eurasian plates. Okay, so you can see that all 3 slices, you can see the presence of the strongest slab. Okay, and you can see also the presence of the weaker overriding plate that we expect the material has to be weaker. And so you can see also here the presence of weaker material under the volcanic arc. Okay, and so this kind of resembles also what Ashima et al. Proposed, that we need like a stronger slab to actually try to match better the data, the observed data. Okay. And so I wanna try to go to the last chapter. I'm gonna probably one slide, but because it's still preliminary, but I'm gonna show you actually what is my current project, why I'm interested in this project. Okay. So the project that I'm tackling right now is just to solve the Bayesian optimized experimental design problems. So what does it mean? I'm interested in looking what are the best configuration, optimal configuration of stations, okay, to maximize your information in the data. Okay, let's say that you're interested in the sleep, and so you need to go in the field and deploy your GPS. Where I should put this GPS to best recover the sleep that you're interested in. Okay, and so I'm gonna start to talk about why I'm interested and why I'm using, for example, the New Zealand case to apply the framework that we are developing here at UTIG, the Oregon Institutes. Here is the New Zealand Peninsula, where you see the North Island and South Island. And here with this blue triangle are the location of the current GPS network in New Zealand. Okay, so you can see a lot of dense coverage where in the North Island where we have the equal margin, but you see a very loose coverage where we have the Alpine Fold in the South Island. Okay, the Alpine Fold goes from here throughout all the South Island. Okay, so the New Zealand colleagues are very interested in this problem because the Alpine Fold is late in the seismic cycle, so they expect that there will be an earthquake of magnitude 7 and 8 in the next decades. Okay, so they want to ask to the government to give them money to deploy new GPS onshore to try to monitor this earthquake and be ready when the earthquake will occur. Okay. So this is kind of more the scientific problem as the practical problem I'm interested in. Okay. And so this is kind of an example of like very preliminary results where we are interested in the sleep distribution problems. And so here we have like 10 candidate of stations. So with this white square, I represented a possible location where I can put GPS stations. Okay. But let's say now I have a limited budget. Okay. So I can put just one station. Okay. Of the 10 possible candidates because we have just a small amount of money. So we need to put this station somewhere. Okay. Where should we put this station? And so here you can see that if I have a station, I should put in this location, okay? And why we should put in this location? Because we want to maximize what is the information of the data, okay? So what we try to maximize, what we call expected information gain, that is a matrix that is based how much information are recovered by the data with respect to your prior knowledge, okay? So let's say that you have prior knowledge of some parameter, okay? And then you want to let the data describe actually what is the most informative information, okay? And so here you can see a test that I did where on the y-axis I plot this matrix, the expected information gain, and on the y-axis the number of stations, given that we have 10 possible candidate stations. So let's say that if you want to put a station, I can put in this location because the red star, our solution of the OED problem, is gonna give the best information if the station is located in this area. Okay. So then here, what we did, we compare our solution of the optimal experimental design problems with all the possible candidates. Okay. So we ran the forward problem, changing the location of all the possible candidates, and we compute the AG, and we compare the AG with our solutions. So with the gray, it represents all the possible combinations, kind of distribution, where here is the mean and here is the maximum and minimum value. And with the red star is the solution of our inverse problem. So you can see that our inverse problem using a sort of like swapping gradient algorithm gives almost always the best solution. Okay. So let's say here in the cartoon, if I have a limited budget to put one station, I should put in these particular locations. If I have a budget that I can buy 2 stations, I should put in this particular location and so on and so forth. Okay. So this is still preliminary, but it's a lot of good promise. Okay. So I want to conclude on kind of like more the conclusions of this work, and then I'm going to touch base on the opportunities. Actually, all this framework that we built in these years will help and will benefit the community. Okay. So like the very briefly conclusion. So we try to develop this numerical framework that can compute forward inverse problem within the same computational architecture. Okay. Then we explain also that we develop a new inversion technique to infer material heterogeneity not from seismic data but from geodetic data. Okay. And then we saw, for example, that we can also do a joint inversions where we can invert the surface displacement to recover both sleep and material heterogeneity. And we show an example of Japan. And we showed actually that the heterogeneity is very important in the sleep distribution problems. And we recover the presence of the strongest slab of the Japan trends, also in Antarctica in the south, by also weaker material overriding plate, and also weaker material underneath the volcanic crater. So this led of new opportunities using this framework, not only in earthquake science, that we can do uncertainty quantification, we can do optimal experimental design, we can do sensitivity analysis, but we can also do using this framework to other type of science, climate science or other type of sciences. And so I want to conclude with this slide where my goal, but also what I would love that this work will go in the future is try to actually go on more the uncertainties quantification, more the inverse problem, more kind of to describe the earthquake system, also the transactions of the system in more kind of digital twin, okay? Where a digital twin is a couple of different models that evolve over time, okay? And they persistently evolve over time, they mutate to actually better represent the observations, okay? So let's say that we have some observations, okay, here, like, new observation that we have from geodetic or seismic or other type of instruments, and then with our inverse problems to actually like improve our uncertainties in the parameters. We can compute those uncertainties of these parameters. We can compute OED to better deploy the sensors to record most informations. And then you can run your forward problem with the uncertainties of this parameter, you can kind of more do physics-based forecasting. Okay, when you have forecasting and you have now a new observation, you have a new model. Okay, and then you try to include more information, more observation in the future, and you go in the loop again. So you accumulate more observation, you compare with the previous models, and then you go in the loop. Okay, try to understand actually that you can present the earthquake like in a more evolving system. Okay, so I hope I didn't go over time. I hope I was clear, and thank you so much for the attention. And I'm very happy to take any questions. Yeah.
I have a question. On slide 31. I wrote it down.
I need to be specific.
So you have subducting slabs, and it looks like maybe just from your color bar, but it looks like your fault plane doesn't really match up with the subducting slab.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you don't include like lateral changes in the fault plane at all, but would that be something you could do, or?
Yeah, so yeah, we can do. I think the reason why we don't exactly match. I mean, let's say that we start from a continuous medium. So our starting model is a continuous medium, then we let them version like to actually run and adjust to get the structure out. The reason, most likely the reason why we don't get a very sharp distinction between the subducting slab and overheading plate is because we are using kind of more Laplacian regularization. So that means that we kind of input smoothing the constraint. We can try to improve the solution using more kind of total variation, the same I showed you before, rectangularization. That is going to preserve better probably the sharp edges would be much lower. So this inversion takes about 3 days. It's going to probably take like a week or so, but it's something that I'm willing to try, and actually I was in mind to try as well. And you're not the first one to ask me.
I mean, another way to put it is, what if you put the fault into the wide area?
Yeah. And I mean, we tried also that one. We try also to change the fault deep in the geometry. Let's say we get the Japan patch in that one, and we perturb the fault geometry, increasing the fault deep for 10 degrees. And we run the same inversion, and we found actually that this result are pretty stable. Okay, and it doesn't change so much.
And like say you put the fault into the wide area, you do what Aaron says.
Yeah.
Whether you have a kink or a curve,
Yeah.
don't do a kink, but make it curve where there's this green dot for some reason.
Yeah.
It's probably not going to be very different, but where is most of the slip compared to this green dot in the middle, right?
Yeah, so
what Aaron is talking about.
yeah, so the most of the slip is in this area.
Right, so that's probably why it's probably not going to be very different.
Exactly,
Because your sources are to the right of the green dot.
Yeah.
And so you could move it down, but if you don't have any drivers,
Yeah.
it's probably not.
Yeah.
That's probably.
One thing also there, I mean, when we try to change the dip of the angle and we infer the same kind of type of results, this dip move a bit towards the trench. I mean, it's something that you can do easily in 2D. But the subduction zone structure doesn't change. It's pretty stable, that one. And one thing that I'm not sure about the result in this area, but we are inverting for 2 parameters, and there's always a trade-off. So you can kind of like get better solution here if you kind of constrain a bit more the sleep, or you can invert just for material properties. But this is always a trade-off. I can show you in the model space.
But do that test. You just take that and trace like a
Yeah.
curvature like what Aaron said.
Yeah.
You do it.
I can do that.
Just to know that it's really not good.
So in relation to that, if we're on that point, from here you said that the sleep, the higher sleep is probably more closer to the trench, which
Yeah.
does coincide better with the Shima model versus yours. Can you go back to that slide when you compare your result to the Shima one?
Yeah.
Yeah, this one.
Yeah.
Okay, so you said in his model, the highest sleep, the 40 minutes closer to the to the
Many
trench.
people have suggested that.
And then you're seeing that it's further backward. So if I understand it completely correctly, this is your adjunct approach, and he used it's completely different modeling, or you use the green function?
No, so in this case, we don't use Green's function.
Okay.
We just leave the optimization problem to calculate the sleep.
Okay.
And so we the method is different, so we don't need to pre-compute big matrices.
So how do you explain this discrepancy? Is it coming from the homogeneous, or
Yeah,
what's the source of this discrepancy between those two? Because the other slide suggested his approach.
yeah.
Probably.
I mean, one thing that I remind is probably like the type of different kind of regularization that they use. We use some more Laplacian type. They use also Laplacian type, but it's kind of slightly more different than the one that we use. So we could try to improve the results, change a bit the regularization, and something that we can try to do it. I mean, I don't see any problems. Yeah, this one I don't know exactly. Also because we don't exactly match, they don't match the offshore. These data are very noisy. They have almost 60 centimeters of standard deviation, so they're very, very noisy. So matching all of them with those uncertainties is very hard. So because you can see the slightly different coverage between offshore and onshore. So the solution is going to try to go towards the more data, the solution goes with data.
But do you remember what happens because you've done all this?
Yeah, we did. So
Where you have,
yeah.
just say, where you have stronger smoothing. like,
Yeah.
So whatever, twice as much smoothing.
Yeah.
And then you give more weight to the
The offshore,
Does
exactly.
it then look more like Hashimo?
It doesn't so much, no. I can
That's
also
what I remember, right?
Yeah, no.
Like yours always is
No.
more like,
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
it doesn't look very different.
I'm gonna explain also what Dustin was. So what we tried is, since we have different coverage with respect to the onshore, to the offshore. So what we did, we need to put some weights in the offshore to give more information, to give like more help the solution to go towards the trench. Okay. But so if you keep the ratio 1:1:1, your slip distribution is gonna point towards all that. So the distribution is gonna be here, which is not exactly right, and also doesn't match the solution very well. And so we try to do the multiple tests, changing this trade-off, the weight between offshore and onshore, and we show that you can also increase, like 4 order of magnitude more of the offshore, the weight, but the solution doesn't change so much. You get a point where actually the solution is going to be pretty stable. And I think I mean, I can try to define type of regularization that on the already, I don't know exactly what. I think it's going to be mostly hard because since you have not a lot of data offshore, you can try to match the observation different ways. The problem is not
Yeah, you gotta weight it more, but then you're biasing because you have less data.
and also the solution is not unique. So you can probably this leaf distribution can get the same kind of misfit of this leaf distribution. Doesn't improve so much.
I guess a couple of things to keep in mind. I mean, the Hashima slip solution is, it's fine.
Yeah.
But there are a number of other ones that look more like what Simone gets.
One of the first ones are actually.
And if the objective is to get the best slip distribution, then you should use the strong motion records, you should look at the offsets that they actually measure the C for.
Yeah,
But it's not really the point here. The point here is to see if you can invert a 3D structure.
Exactly.
And it works sort of like magic, which was sort of shocking and still kind of hard to believe. So yeah, this might not be the best slip distribution, but it's the first time that anyone inverted it for Shimon.
Yeah. And also, I mean, just an aside, we also try to run the same kind of problem, not only in Japan, but in the Equiranga margin to better match the slow sleep in 2014 with Laura Wallace. And where there we have only 44 onshore and offshore GPS. And we show that actually the presence of material heterogeneity is not very effective. So the contribution of material heterogeneity in the sleep distribution seems not to be very important. And I think the reason is also because we have very few stations. And so, if I go back, for example, in this simple test, if you have only few stations, you can see that actually the contribution of material heterogeneity is much lower than actually the contribution of the sleep, So, if the data are not a lot, and you don't have a lot of information about the structure, your inversion is gonna not give you good results. So it's also always we choose Japan because it's probably the best test case because we're more than 1,300 GPS stations, probably one of the best.
But Simone, as to that statement.
Yeah.
I mean, Laura was involved in papers that made the case that heterogeneity is important.
Yeah.
Right? So I think what you mean to say is that you cannot distinguish
Exactly.
between variations in slip and heterogeneity.
Exactly.
So you can have heterogeneity, you can have slip, or you have whatever, no heterogeneity in the slip of slip.
Exactly.
You can't say which is which, and here you can.
Exactly. Yeah. Because the amount of information contained in this data are much more than what we have in some other places. So, yeah. But on that, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, you go back to your trade-off plot.
Yeah.
If you like just take that best fitting bit, could you do that in 3D as well? And then maybe show like the changes in heterogeneity and slip for your Japan problem?
Yeah.
Like,
It's gonna take forever to run.
Yeah.
You can always do,
Yeah.
but the solution we also try to actually increase number of station model solutions in
yeah. So do you think that would maybe give you, you had that little bit of strong stuff in the upper plate?
Yeah.
Do you think
Yeah.
that could just be part of the trade-off?
Exactly,
Just
exactly.
Get something.
Yeah. And so the solution, I mean, we know that, inverse solution not unique, but you can see here the trade-off between that, even though slightly changing either the structure or the sleeve can produce the same surface displacement.
Mhm.
So if you want to try to invert this surface displacement, you can see that it's always like a trade-off between two parameters. And you can kind of like reduce the uncertainty here, because you can actually say, okay, let's just assume that I know the sleep. Okay, so let's assume that we know the sleep distribution, and we can just invert problematic properties, or vice versa. And so for sure that when you constrain somehow one parameter, and then you work with the other parameter. So that case you're gonna improve it.
Yeah. Any more questions before? Or on Zoom?
I have.
Mine's easy. Can you go to your little station, the Bayesian station thing?
Yeah.
So you have red triangles.
Mhm.
What is the empty blue square mean? I can't see.
Which one? Yeah.
Yeah, so you have like a blue square with a red triangle, which would presumably, if you have one station, that's where you should put it.
Exactly.
On that third line, what's an empty blue square? Or a triangle in a white square?
This one, okay. So sorry, I didn't explain very well. So the white squares are basically the possible candidates, all the possible candidates. So let's say that I select possible candidate stations, and then I have a budget, I need to put some places of these ones. Okay. So the gray one here is the best station configuration, just running all the possible combination of stations.
Okay.
So you can see that, for example, if you need to select one station out of 10, you have 10 possible combinations. Okay. If you select 2 out of 10, you use 45 and so on and so forth. Okay. So the gray square here is the best solution, all the possible candidates. So that means what actually should be in reality. Okay. Instead, the red triangle is basically the solution of our inverse problem.
Okay.
Or the really problem. Okay, you can see that mostly we're gonna almost always, not always, we're gonna put our solution is gonna be exactly where actually should be. But in some cases where for example, station we have 3 out of 10 or 4 out of 10, the solution is super optimal. So it's very close to the optimal solution, but you can see that it doesn't reach the maximum. Okay? So that one is, but the computation can be pretty expensive, and so we are doing that in a cheap way, very fast way. So that is why we think that this algorithm works pretty well. It's not optimal.
I have a question about this too. In both, so for both the inverse problem and in brute force.
Yeah.
When you go from like one station to 2 stations, you assume that the first station has to stay where you put it, or it can go anywhere.
Can go anywhere.
Okay.
Yeah, can go anywhere. Yeah, this is kind of repeating the same exercise regardless of what was the previous example. Yeah. It's just a test how to show that, if we need to put 1 or 2 station, 3 station, the configuration is going to change based on the solutions.
I can ask you.
No, actually, this is I do it like every survey. That's great to do resurvey synthetics, but in deterministic, like doing indentation. That I'm sure will be better. If you go back to the Green's function versus the adjoint slide you have, the synthetics.
The results, so
Yeah, the normalized residuals that you have for the synthetics are these things.
this one,
Yeah,
okay.
so I don't know. In my word, like this kind of small discrepancy in the normalized residuals, I don't know, you normalize it. I would say this is insignificant. Like, okay, obviously you get better residuals in your case, but is it that so important in terms of in actual data that will give you to more precise results? Or is just because it seems to me like a lot of work for a little strawberry?
Yeah. So we last year when we published this paper, we are basically interested on the approach. So we are interested in if instead of like computing a very expensive matrix, we actually has a very strong assumption about homogeneous video or layer vertical medium in the earth. If you can do something more and more flexible, okay? And so all the framework that we built using our joints, it doesn't allow only to solve this kind of, let's say, simple problem because it's a linear problem, but you can solve more non-linear problem that we solve for the joint or for the material problems. So the goal of this paper was basically to compare our approach that we developed this flexible framework that can solve four inverse problems. And we just to compare that we can solve the same problem in a different way. So we didn't compare exactly the performance, we didn't compare exactly like time, computational time, we didn't compare exactly as we compare these two methods. And so the main
with your approach, you have more flexibility.
exactly, you have more flexibility, you can do something more that people
More complex.
And it's faster, right? I mean,
it's faster, especially for like
it's more finished, but less computation.
that's the quotation. And I mean, the main funding of the paper was basically this one, just that we did kind of like approach that we just minimize a function instead of computing expensive matrices. You can get the same kind of results of what people have done for like 30, 40 years. Okay. So you can see that actually the matrix that you can do Green's function here is kind of the spectrum, the composition, so the matrix is kind of very similar, you know.
So if you apply it on real data and see the difference of the output model, or just real data besides synthetics?
I mean, we use we Japan as a but we didn't compute Green's function, we just done it there.
Okay, so we're past 3 o'clock, so maybe we can thank Simone once again. And yeah, please fill out the PhD talk form, which is on an email.
Yeah, they're hot, right? But also some